My name is Bill Ward, 89 years old, young.
Okay.
Joined the National Guard in 1938 out of South High School in South Minneapolis with about 6 other fellows. We knew what was coming. We heard it on the radio and everything. Hitler was on the move. So we went down to the armory in downtown Minneapolis, the big National Guard armory. And 2 units worked out of the armory, the 133rd Infantry and the 151st Field Artillery. Some joined the 133rd, some joined the 151st. I was lucky I joined the artillery. Not many guys came back from the 135th. Anyway, we were mobilized. We joined. My folks had a sign for me because I was only 16, junior in South High School. And after we joined, in fact, not long after, a couple of months after we joined, we were indoctrinated, the whole 34th Division, into federal service. That was February 10th, 1941. But we lived in the armory part-time. Most of us could go home at night. But we were preparing to move on to a training base in Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. And so on about March 5th, the units start moving out of the armory by train, by convoy, to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. That was near Alexandria, Louisiana. And that would be the home of the 34th Infantry Division, Minnesota and Iowa Guard. And so we spent the first 2 months getting the shape into livable quarters because it was a sea of mud. And hard training started down there. We were involved in the big 1941 maneuvers. It was the largest military maneuver in United States history. About 300,000 guys were involved.
And this was where?
In Camp Claiborne. Well, it took place in Louisiana, okay. The whole state, the swamps and everything else, in part of Texas and then part of Mississippi. So from there, I was on KP duty one day in December 7th. Over the little radio come the announcement of Pearl Harbor. And that day, one of the guys in my outfit named Francis Boyda, I don't know if you ever heard of him, he became famous later on. His brother was on the Arizona. He didn't know it at the time, in fact, for a couple of weeks. But after that, Pearl Harbor, we had 3 alerts. The 4th one was real. We entrained for Fort Dix, New Jersey. Arrived at Fort Dix, New Jersey by train. We left Claiborne on January 1st of '42. We were there until January 14th. Unheated tents, 15 above. They issued us sleeping bags that when we started to move out to the docks at Hoboken, New Jersey, all the barrack bags had to be turned in, but all we were equipped with is 2 barracks bags, a rifle, our .45 automatics, and a musette bag carrying personable items. Loaded on the 6x6s, prime movers, took us to the docks at Hoboken. Loaded us, this is in the middle of the night, we were loaded onto ferry boats across the harbor into New York Harbor, where we got off and went up the gangplank on a big gray ship called, it was a big ocean liner, British made. The Strathard was the name of it. And there our journey started to North Ireland. 2 ships pull out of the harbor. And
what year was this?
About the end of January.
What year was this now?
In 42.
42.
January of 42.
Okay.
Left the harbor at New York Harbor, 2 ships. Just 2 ships were going. This would hold the first 3,000 Americans to go to Europe in World War II. This was our combat team. The 133rd Infantry and the 151st Field Artillery, plus smaller units like quartermaster, medical outfits and stuff. It took us about 12 days to get to Belfast, Ireland, and through submarine territories, because that's when the submarines were at their peak. In fact, we had several warnings on the way over. We were escorted by American destroyers halfway, and one morning we got up and they took us up on deck because we were way down in the bottom holds, and there was a lot of British troops on there already going home from Libya, from the British 8th Army. So this ship was loaded with personnel, but there was we woke up one morning to go up for some exercise on deck, and we had to do it at certain times. And anyway, this one morning, the destroyers were gone, and little teeny boats were out there, and they were British corvettes, a lot faster than our destroyers, but they took us in all the way to Belfast Harbor. And we got to Belfast, let's see, we got to Belfast January 26th of 42. There we went to, well, we were there for almost a year training under the British. We had British officers along with our officers and a cadre of non-coms from the British 8th Army, the guys, veterans of Libya and the 8th Army against Rommel. And they trained us on the weapons that we were to use throughout the North African campaign, the British 25-pounder artillery piece. And we fired missions up in the Sparran Mountains. That was our biggest deal, getting really acclimated to the British artillery and the way it was used. And it was a lot of, because we had been training on the old American, or the French 75s in the Guard days. And so that went on for almost a year, and then on the 12th of December in 43, we left the last base we were in at Annaskillen and trained for Larne, north of Belfast, onto small boats over to Scotland, and from Scotland to Chester, England, and there's where we trained for about 3 weeks, mainly road marches and getting used to getting all our weaponry that we carried in shape. Then one night the whistles blew. We had out into the company streets, loaded onto big transports, and on our way down to the train station, loaded on trains, and then about 40 miles away we were coming into Liverpool in the middle of the night, because it was still blackouts. They were still bombing England. And we went through block after block. As dawn approached, we could see out the windows on this train, and we were loaded down with all our gear, and we know what we were just about to do. And seen all these buildings destroyed mile after mile in Liverpool. Got to the dock area, loaded up on big transports, and in a day or so we're on our way to North Africa, our convoy. Landed at Oran, North Africa, after going through the Gibraltar, Straits of Gibraltar, and we could see at night the lights of Spain way off in the distance, because we were right near Gibraltar when we went through the strait, because Spain was neutral, and the towns were all lit up. It was quite a feeling. Anyway, as our ship turned to go into our Iran harbor, now on this ship was our combat team, the 133rd Infantry and the 151st. Other ships contained other units of the 34th Division. As we turned in, we got rammed by the same ship that we went over to Ireland on, the Strathford. Put about a 27-inch gash below, even below the water line. Luckily, we were near the port. Every man on the ship had to get on one side of the ship because it was listing like this. We made it into the harbor, and then we had to climb down ropes and whatever means we could to get off of it. And there was a lot of men on that boat. And anyway, a few guys got killed, infantry guys, where they had to close off one compartment, and some injuries. But outside of that, we come through pretty good. And from there, after we settled down in Iran, there was no fighting going on at the time. Most of it was over on the official landings. The landings were made, the initial landings were made about 2 months before. So from there, we went to a little town called Montignac by train. We didn't have our artillery or our trucks or anything. And we took up this little town of Montignac. Was in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains. And we took up the whole town square. And for 3 weeks we did nothing but school ourselves. Now at the time, as we got to Montignac, ordnance and the transport outfits brought up our trucks and our guns to town. And we trained on our guns right in the streets of this little town. And the one thing we had to do, every man in the battery, whether you were a communications man, a BAR man, or a truck driver, had to learn the other guy's position. You had to know how to drive a 6x6, a Jeep, or a weapons carrier, work on the guns and the gun crew. So every guy had to be knowledgeable about every position. That was the main purpose of that little town. Then, on the February 7th of '43, we entrained by convoy 700 miles over the Atlas Mountains to Tunisia. We went way up, not far off the coast. It was the only road going. And it took us several days, of course, to get there. We went over mountain passes with snow, slept in our trucks because there was no place to bivouac on the ground. It was covered with snow and cold. And finally, we started getting down out of the mountains, and we got across the border of Tunisia, a place called Constantine. And there we were approaching the front lines that would have been set up where we would be. And so I gotta flip over. Anyway, we were near the town of Maktar. First heard artillery fire. Started having German planes approach our positions. We hadn't fired a shot yet, but we were getting into position. And anyway, we seen an American bomber, light bomber, a Mitchell, get shot down. That was our first view of combat by German Messerschmitt. And the thing that really got to us, they killed the pilot on the way down. And that prepared a lot of guys mentally for combat. We're going to kill Germans now. Well, it didn't take long. Anyway, several battles, we finally got into, now we were in General Patton's 2nd Corps. along with the 1st Division, 3rd Division, and the 1st Armored Division. We were the only National Guard outfit in that 2nd Corps under Patton. And of course the battles are names a lot of people probably can remember. The Kasserine Pass, which was a diabolical thing for the Americans, because the new Americans, even the regular Army guys from the 1st and the 3rd, never were in combat for. And the Germans held the upper hand. Now this was Rommel's guys, what was left of his corps coming out of Libya into Tunisia. And the British 8th Army was coming right behind. But the British 8th Army was on the eastern flank, and we were on the western flank. And there was notable battles at Fondue Gap, and eventually Hill 609, getting near Bizerta on the northern part of Tunisia. And anyway, taking a time out now, I'm catching a breath.
That's fine.
Anyway, combat ended around May 16th on the Battle of 609, where the 2nd Corps finally caught up with mainly part of the German army on those rugged hills.
Now your outfit, the artillery outfit, so where did you have to start firing your artillery?
Oh, well, we fired it all through the Tunisian campaign, backing up the 133rd Infantry. That was our combat team. Then the 175th Field Artillery was backing up the 135th Infantry.
Did you end up with any German artillery coming back your way?
Oh, yeah, I'll show you after a while.
Okay.
One that almost got me and 2 other guys. German 88 was the one we feared the most. You probably heard a lot of the German 88. If you go down to the military museum, you'll see some of the stuff down there, German equipment. But anyway, after 609, the British 8th Army moved up into the plains of Bizerta, approaching Bizerta, a flat plain leveled out towards the Mediterranean. And there's where we finally ended the campaign, on the shores of Lake Bizerta. And that's where we started what's supposed to be our rest camp. And we were probably about 40 miles from Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. And so things were set up there for us to have some rest, but then we were assigned details. All the units up there of the 34th Division were assigned details. Some to guard German prisoners. There was 200,000 German prisoners of war up there in camps. The British took care of some of them, we took care of some of them. And I was assigned to a detail. Luckily I had the knowledge of driving a 6x6, of driving convoys from the docks at Bizerta at night to bases, air bases that were popping up all over the sands and the plains. They were just regular built runways just to back up the invasions that were to come. And also they were still not starting to bomb parts of Palermo and places like that. And we'd haul gasoline or 500-pound bombs in the back of these trucks. Have convoys. One of our officers always led the convoy, and we had to go by at night. And the only lights were on all our vehicles had these little small lights. They weren't very bright. They were a little blue light just to identify you, and so you didn't run into each other. Blackout lights, they call them. And we would go to these different bases all around, dump off the bombs, dump off the 50-gallon drums. Then finally, that detail it took about 3 weeks up there along Lake Bizerta. And then just about every night, Jerry would come over with a couple of planes and drop a few bombs in the whole area, just for kind of disturb us a little bit. No, didn't do much damage. But then the word came that we were going to move back to Iran for extensive amphibious training. And that started on let's see, July 27th of 43, we started the same trip, only in the opposite direction, back over the Atlas Mountains to a place called Arzu near Iran, right where we had been several months before we started out. And there we trained amphibious landing, LCTs, and by this time now we turned in our 25-pounder British equipment, and we had our American 105s. And there is where we did a lot of training on the 105s with our infantry outfit, running rolling barrages and stuff in the areas around Oran, and this was in Algeria. Then one day, the order, after we were there for a while, and let's see, the 8th, which would be August the 21st, we hooked up all our equipment and was on our way back to Bizerta, back over the Atlas Mountains again, for the third time. Got to Bizerta, and the training involved loading up our equipment on LCT, that's the transport, where the artillery went, our vehicles, the 6x6s, the trucks, ducks that we were to land in when we got to Italy. You heard of ducks, the famous duck.
Yep.
And there, on September 5th, we embarked on our LSTs with all our men and plus the ducks on a convoy, and eventually landed on the 9th at Salerno, Italy. And that was the main invasion of Italy. The British landed on the southeastern part of Italy. We landed at Salerno. And our outfit, the 151st, was attached to the 36th Division from Texas. They had never been in combat before, but they had to fill up their ranks with other units from different divisions. And so we were the only part of the 34th that landed at Salerno. And actually it was credited as saving the beachhead, because we knocked out probably about 20 German tanks on the beachhead. And from there, the rest of the division came in the next week or so. And now we were part of Mark Clark's 5th Army, along with several other divisions, American divisions, and also a British Army unit. And that's where the road up the boot of Italy started, a 1,000-mile boot trip. And the Germans were always in command, because if you've ever been to Italy or know anything about it, it's a mountainous country. And the Germans always held the high ground. Well, the first couple of weeks were pretty busy, mainly fighting German tanks, knocking out German tanks, and we destroyed a lot of them. Our infantry had a rough time. They lost a lot of men. So anyway, after the main invasion, of course, then the big trip started north. On October 7th, we were near a little town called Benevito, and that was about the last place I would be with the 34th Division. Now, I overlooked telling you, after we were in that rest camp at Lake Bizerta, I developed yellow jaundice. Never was so sick in my life. And after that, everything went wrong with my blood. I had large boils develop, had to have them pierced by the medics. And off and on, I'd have periods of things going on like that. But, and we got in this one position near this Benavita, I got blood poisoning. I had streaks starting to go up both arms, and that ended my career. Back to North Africa by way of right near, not far, they made a big port of entry near Salerno where all the material could be brought in for this big push up the boot of Italy. That was our main supply line. And that's where I went back on a ship. Back to near Oran and to a town called Sidi Ballabas. And from Sidi Ballabas to a general hospital in Casablanca. In the meantime, medics were treating my arms. When I got to Casablanca, I had streaks up to the elbow. And they saved me by, I don't know what it was, they had pulled my arms wrapped, both arms wrapped, and kept them soaked with whatever they used. And finally, they got control of it. And I said, I'm going to get back to my outfit. And I went before some kind of a board there at the general hospital. Said, no, your blood's too bad, you're going home.
What caused the poisoning, do you know?
Well, same thing that caused the yellow jaundice, filth. We were mud and dirt and crud and every kind of a disease. A lot of guys got various illnesses because of the, we were living in filth. We'd go through these little villages and there was, my God, there was a lot of guys got fleas out in little air villages. We slept in mud and water on the ground. You never had a roof over your head. And I just have to pick up whatever causes yellow jaundice. And to this day, nobody can use my blood. I can use it, but nobody else can use it. In fact, years later, well anyway, to continue the story, was from Casablanca by ship back to Newport News, Virginia. Newport News, Virginia on a train to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Incidentally, today is the 1-year anniversary of the big tornadoes that hit Tuscaloosa. Well, that's where I was in a place called Northington General Hospital. And I was there for about 2 weeks. Got my discharge there. I was on my way home to Minneapolis. And that was the end of the career.
And what year was that again?
August 21st, pardon me, the 21st of December 1943. That ended my career.